Welcome everybody to the E4 AV Tour. My name is Melody Craigmile. I'm the Vice President of Marketing for Almo Professional AV. How many of you were with us here in Irvine about a year and a half ago? Great, lots of repeat attendees. Thanks for coming today.
Almo was started in 1946 by two gentlemen, Morris Green, my father-in-law, and Al Margolis, as a small distributor of replacement parts for radios. The original name of the company was Almo Radio Company. Almo is a contraction of the first two names of the founders, Al Margolis and Morris Green, Al and Mo. It was important to be at the top of the alphabet because in 1946, Yellow Pages were the business-to-business. So, Almo. We grew from a very small parts distributor, added the industrial electronics business in the 50s. In the 60s, went into some consumer electronics. What makes Almo a good company is great employees. Good employees. Almo has great employees. Almo has a very small operation in 1946 to today. We're a $600 million plus distributor servicing the whole country. Almo has progressed into a third generation business.
Today, Almo is made of 5 different divisions.
All right, obviously we're having some technical difficulties. Is there anybody can do anything with the audiovisual here today? Just kidding. House AV? Right, okay. So welcome to the tour. We get asked very often, what are the 4 E's in the E4? Well, of course, it's education. A lot of you are here for your CTS renewal units, and thanks to our partnership with Infocom, we're able to offer that. We're exploring new products and solutions. Exchanging ideas and networking, that's a very important part of our program here too. And finally, we have an expo with 30 of our best manufacturers, some great new solutions you're going to see today. So we have your sales reps here from the region. Be sure and say hi to them. Doug Schulte is here, Randy Rabinovich, and Lindsay Sittner, and then also Sean McNeil, our Vice President of Sales. So they will be around to answer any questions that you have about becoming an Almo partner or any other questions about products or services. So today's agenda, we have a great lineup here today. As you can see, you're right here in our keynote with Gary Kayye. And then shortly after that, back in the hotel, in the conference theater, we're proud to have Tom Kerr from Infocom, who's going to be discussing assessing network readiness for AV solutions. Kramer is here teaching one of their great courses on connectivity and signal distribution. That's in the Saddleback room. And then we have a very special guest, a company called Moving Murals, and they know everything there is to know about 4K. So if you're interested in learning about content or 4K displays, what applications to use them in, this is going to be a really incredible class, and they're going to be in the LG booth today. At 12:15, we will be having a tech expert brain freeze. So we have some of our business development managers and technical expert from NEC. So bring your questions and leave with answers in that technical session. And then finally at 1:30, we have Midori Conley, who's new to our tour, and she's going to be discussing the customer experience at live events and how interacting with mobile devices, bring your own device, and those types of new trends. So Midori will be in the conference theater. David Arnett from NEC is going to be discussing edge blending. He has a live demo of edge blending in that room, which is really fascinating. And then finally, Braun Consulting is going to be discussing demystifying media players, the different types of media players, and why you would want to choose one in a different application. At 2:30, back in the exhibit hall, is our prize drawing. We will be giving away about $5,000 worth of prizes today, so be sure and stick around for that. And then at 3 o'clock, we've got Tom Kerr again talking about audio gain structure. We have Cables to Go talking about digital video connectivity. And finally, we have Braun Consulting in talking about digital signage metrics and how you explain to your customer how to measure the effectiveness of their digital signage in their application. So that's a brand new class on the tour. We're glad to have that. And at 3 o'clock, just after the exhibit hall closes, we are proud that Barco, one of our newest partners, is going to be doing a projector showcase of their newest projectors. So that will be in the Oak Creek room, and you can enjoy talking with Barco about their new solutions. We also have Samsung here with their Smart School demonstration. That's right outside the exhibit hall, which is a total solution with tablets, software, and interactive display. So that's every hour on the hour. Be sure and check that out. And I just want to say a special thank you to our partners here who have made this event possible. These are our partners that are exhibiting here today. And just as a reminder, every product you see here today is available through Almo Professional AV, and be sure to reach out to one of your reps to discuss how to get access to all those great products and solutions. Special thank you to some of our partners providing some of our audiovisual equipment. Thank you very much to Cables to Go, Daylight, Draper, and NEC. So many of you are here. How many here are CTS certified professionals? Got a few in here for those renewal units. So to get those renewal units, just make sure you have your badge scanned when you enter the class, and we have your CTS number on file, and you will get those renewal units. And then people ask, how do I win those prizes? Well, you do that by visiting our exhibit hall, get 16 stamps from our vendors, and put it in the big gold raffle bin, and we'll do that prize drawing at 2:30. We also get asked very often, how do I get copies of these wonderful presentations that you see here today? And it's really simple. You go to e4avtour.com/on-demand, and you can download all of the presentations. And in addition, we're going to be shooting videos of a lot of the great products and solutions. So you can, if you have colleagues that couldn't make it today, or maybe somebody in a different office across the country, send them to that web address and they can join in on the excitement after the show. We are doing some streaming live broadcast today, so we'd like to say hi to our people that are watching across the country on Ustream. If you have questions for Gary Kayye, you can tweet those in at the hashtag E4Live. So we have an exciting keynote from Mr. Gary Kayye. If you've never heard his crystal ball, you may have read his article that he used to do in Sound and Communications, but he's going to be giving you some great information that you can take away today and use in your business. So I'd like to welcome Gary Kayye.
Thank you. Hold our breath and cross our fingers, and maybe it'll work. We're at the mercy of the network. We'll see. Okay, welcome everybody. I'm excited to be back. I was in Irvine about a year and a half ago and had my then 11-year-old daughter with me, and we went to Disneyland the next day, which is, of course, the thing you always do when you go to Southern California, so I'm excited to be back. And last time I was here, I talked about digital signage and sort of where that market was, and there's a little bit of digital signage in this presentation, but basically this presentation is broken into two parts. And as Melody just mentioned, to those of you watching, there's a couple of hundred people online right now watching live. If you want to actually join our live stream, or if you want to ask a question, because I'll have a session towards the end where you can ask questions, all you do is ask those questions using the hashtag E4Live. If you're here live and you want to ask a question, you're afraid to answer, raise your hand, and you can use that hashtag on Twitter as well. But this is broken into two parts. So every year I've written an article. For about 10 years, I wrote it for Sound and Communications magazine. For the last 3 years, it's been published in our publication, Rave Publications. And we actually have subscription cards here available for our publication, which we'll pass around for those of you who aren't subscribing now. It's free. And what I do at the beginning of the year is I talk about what's happened over the last year and what's going to happen over the next year technologically, and sort of how that's going to affect maybe the next 2 or 3 years. So that's what I'm going to do. So I've taken this session and divided it into two parts. So the first part of this session is what's happened over the last year in the AV market, and sort of touch on how that's going to affect what's going to happen next year in AV. And I'm going to kind of go forward maybe 16, 18 months. I'm not going to go too far in the future because it really doesn't really affect your daily job. So I'm mostly going to focus on stuff that's going on right now. So for those of you who haven't been paying attention over the last year, we've adopted 2 network-based standards that are dominating the market right now. AVB is an audio, pretty much adopted by every audio manufacturer as a way to move audio across the network. It has the capability of moving video across the network, but right now it's sort of been it's primarily been used as the replacement for CobraNet, and it's a lot better than CobraNet. So all the audio companies out there, and a lot of the video companies that make audio products, companies like Krystal and AMX and Extron and companies like that as well, Biamp, they've all adopted AVB-based technology, and that's audio-video bridging. And basically, if you want to go find out what AVB does, you can just go to Wikipedia and type in AVB, and there's all sorts of articles on it. Or you can go to Audinate. If you go to audinate.com, they have the Dante system, which is the system used by over 100 manufacturers to move content across an AVB network. Again, that's Audinate Dante. The other standard is HD-based-T. How many of you have heard of HD-based-T? Okay, HD-based-T is not totally a network, but what it is it works like a network. So you can move video, audio, control, Ethernet, USB, and power across a network. Now, the value of that is it does everything that AVB does, but it also adds video. And the neat thing about adding video is that means that the stuff we've been doing, RGB, HV, VGA, and HDMI can all be moved across an HD-based-T signal, a wire that's Cat5e or Cat6, something like that. So one Cat5e, one Cat6, you'd be able to move everything we're doing in a room like this, or anything you do in a typical boardroom, conference room, or training room across Cat5 or Cat6 wire. And the really cool thing about it is you'd actually be able to power the display across it as well. Now, that requires displays that don't draw 250 to 500 watts of power to operate. So what it's able to power now are LED-based panels. So if you have LED backlit panels, some of the new generation LED backlit panels, of course, there are projector manufacturers out there like Panasonic and Sony and Epson, who actually they're here on the show floor today. In fact, today I think Almo is actually officially announcing that they've picked up the Epson line. They all have HD-based-T inputs, so you can actually plug the HD-based-T signal directly into the projector and run audio and video across the network. And this is something that you should pay attention to. These are the two standards that are pretty much dominating the market. So if you name any video and audio routing manufacturer out there, they're using one of these two standards. Again, AVB mostly for audio and HD-based-T for sort of traditional AV routing and distribution. And what you will eventually see is a system that will allow anything to be powered across the network. Of course, projectors that are in the 4,000 to 5,000 ANSI lumens, we have a little ways to go to get the power down. But these flat panel displays like what we have here in front of me, that'll be able to be powered across HD-based-T within a year. As I said about a year and a half ago, digital signage market is the fastest growing segment of AV. It still is the fastest growing segment of AV, and we are doing a better job. We're doing about 23 to 24%. They're putting chairs in the back, so sorry about the noise. But we're doing about 23, 24% of the total digital signage market. When I came here a year and a half ago, we were 16 to 18%. So we're doing a lot better than we were before. But we could be doing a whole lot more. So we're building up. We're doing a little bit more over time. But of course, the money is not in integrating the hardware. The money is integrating the services and the content. How many of you have gotten in the digital signage market and are doing digital signage? Yeah, it's about, that represents about what I would think, about 10 to 15% of you. Again, there's three elements to digital signage, in case you don't remember from last time I was here. There's the hardware side of it, which is sort of the hang and bang kind of installation that you're used to doing for years and years and years. It's not that complicated other than you add the network complexity to it. Then there's the service side of it, because it's got to be operational 24 hours a day in most places. And then the third element is the content, and that's where all the money is. The margins on content is huge, because of this segment of the market being very network-centric, the home AV integrator has jumped in the digital signage market a little bit faster than the Pro AV integrator. In fact, the home AV integrator site, digital signage, is their second largest segment right now because of the fact that they've jumped in that market. So we've had some changes in projection. Obviously, we have brighter portable projectors. LED-based projectors are finally here, and we even have laser projectors. Monitor segment, there's been a lot of developments there as well. Ironically, I think we all know that LED is sort of the standard that everything is moving towards, both for lighting and for generating of, and in fact, we have future technologies, OLED, which is an LED-based technology. You actually see a large format OLED display on display here from Samsung today, maybe the largest one most of you guys have seen. And we're also going to talk about OLED technology during our panel today at lunch. Everything is native 1080p now, as opposed to having multiple resolutions for displays, and that's because everything is coming ultimately from the consumer side and sort of trickling down to the professional side. So we've sort of standardized on a 16:9 or 16:10 aspect ratio. And 97% of the display market is LCD now. So obviously LCD is sort of dominating the market. And as I said, there's new technologies coming along. And the irony of that is that plasma has been the differentiator in the market. But as you know, it was just announced last week that Panasonic is officially getting out of the plasma market, which is something we've all predicted for years and years. But it is still is kind of the differentiator now, the fact that because it can do such large sizes and the colorimetry of plasma, but of course it's a very small segment of the market. And of course on the display side, we've seen the return of the video wall, and that's exciting. For those of you, how many of you have been in the market for longer than 10 years? Okay, so those of you in the market for longer than 10 years, you remember this was a big deal 10, 12, 15 years ago. And there were companies that made their name and their business only selling video wall technology and accessories for video walls. But it kind of disappeared for a while because we got larger flat panel displays that we could tile together, and now all of a sudden it's back again in a bigger way with not only tiled LCD displays, but also we can do that with custom branded products like the micro tiles from Krystal Digital, of course. Those are very popular. Samsung has their own 20 by 20, 20 inch by 20 inch tile product as well, and you're going to see some others come out over the next year as well. That has not gone unnoticed by the other manufacturers out there of displays. In control systems, that's gone through a revolution as well. I mean, it used to be that control manufacturers were control manufacturers and video signal routing and distribution manufacturers were separate, right? Now they're all joined together. So control manufacturers are doing video routing and distribution as well. And it's become sort of the hub. And of course, a huge development over the last year. If you look back only a year and a half ago, it was nearly impossible to integrate a consumer display like a tablet, an iPad primarily, into a boardroom, conference room, or training room, other than maybe using it by ultimately, excuse me, let me get past this little thing here. Ask me later. Other than maybe launching a web browser and typing an IP address, they were doing it that way. But now the manufacturers of everybody, every control system manufacturer, every signal routing and distribution manufacturer is now integrating tablets, consumer tablets, as interfaces into their products, even iPhones and Samsung phones. So we've seen a huge amount of movement there, something that obviously I predicted a year and a half ago when I was writing that article. And then of course, video conferencing is also back. That was big. Again, that's another one of those technologies that was big 10 years ago. We tried it as an industry to integrate video conferencing, but the problem we had as an industry, meaning our industry, we were only doing about 10% of the total video conferencing integration, and most of it was being done by phone companies, as you know. You were all competing with those companies. Is that they had this form factor that required ISDN or T1 connectivity, which was very difficult for us to do because we didn't have the control of that. That was basically controlled by the phone companies. Well, over the last 10 years, that's all gone IP. And over the last year, you've seen explosive growth because of some of the standards that are out there. So how many of you have been paying attention to the Unified Communications Standards? Okay, that's a big deal because, and I think a lot of people look at it as sort of marketing hype, but it's really a big deal because here we have a company like Microsoft who had come out with this link standard that's pretty much been adopted by all the major video conferencing manufacturers out there. And what's nice about that is that now you can integrate the video conference device on the network, but connect it to all the other communications devices. And that's the whole concept behind UC, Unified Communications, is that your cell phone, your desktop phone, if you happen to still have one in your office, your video conferencing, and your instant messaging communication, as well as your email, are all using the same platform. So there's a little bit of a standards battle going on there because we have Jabber, we have the Microsoft Link technology as well, and then we have some consumer standards that are out there as well. So that will be interesting to sort of watch over the next year. So that hasn't totally played itself out. And then we have consumer devices like this. How many of you have seen the Biscotti video conferencing device.
We
Anybody?
live in a high-tech world, so
Nobody?
staying connected shouldn't be that hard, right? Maybe for my son in college who grew up in the tech generation, but for me, video calling today is computer software and not to mention planning. But I think I found a solution that even my parents can handle. It's this new high-def TV phone that, hold on.
Hey, Mom. I don't have long because I have to go to class, but I promised I'd show you my grade on my paper, so...
All right, so that's obviously a sort of a consumer video for it. You can go online to biscotti.com and watch that whole thing if you want. But basically what Biscotti is, and the reason why I put this up here, is that that's another example of the consumer market that's ultimately going to drive acceptance in the professional market. So Biscotti is a little box that's a camera that has an HDMI in and an HDMI out. So you route your cable box through this box. So you route your DirecTV box or whatever set-top box you're using through Biscotti, and it connects to your TV. And so when a call comes in, whatever television show you're watching freezes, and the call blinks and says, do you want to take this call right now? If you decide to take it, it shows you who's calling you. Then you take it, and it overlays on top of the screen the television show that you're watching, and you can set the degree of opacity of that, and if you want it to fill the whole screen or what you want to have it do. And then when you disconnect from the call, then you go back to watching your TV show. But here's the neat thing about this. Because they've integrated the consumer CEC standard, which I don't know how many of you have followed that, if your TV's off and someone calls, the TV will turn on and make a buzzing noise so that you can hear throughout the house telling you that someone's calling you on Biscotti. So even if your television is off, it allows you to take a call. Now, again, it's a very consumer product because it's only $199. So it's a video conferencing product for your home. It's $199. It is 720p video, so if you do have a high enough bandwidth going into your house, which probably most of you do, especially living in Southern California, do have that. So it is high quality. You are getting high quality video conferencing. And it also is compatible with some video standards that are out there. Like if you're a Gmail user, then you can use Google Video with it. So you don't have to use, it's not just Biscotti to Biscotti. You can dial up with a Gmail call, video call, and then connect to a Biscotti user or vice versa. Biscotti can call people on Gmail, on anybody using Google Video or Google Voice, or for that matter, just Gmail. It's $199. The reason why I pointed out is those two features. The fact that it has the CEC communications integrated into it, so it can actually control your TV and turn it on and off and that kind of stuff, and the price at $199. And what happens is, what's good about this for our industry, because a lot of you may be thinking, well, that's not so great for our industry, because if I'm selling expensive video conferencing equipment. Well, basically, this is a good example of the future of video conferencing. The future of video conferencing isn't the hardware, it's the integration of the software. Ultimately, the codec, which now we're selling as a hardware piece, is going to go to the cloud. So what Biscotti's doing is that's exactly what they're doing. The codecs actually live at their headquarters on servers, and all that is a camera. So all that's doing is connecting to the internet and going to a codec on the cloud, completing the connectivity, and you can connect multiple users at the same time. It's not just a one-to-one call. I think you can connect up to 6 now. And then you disconnect, and the codec's in the cloud. That's why the box is so cheap. All right. So, and it's consumer-based. It's a consumer-based, and they do have a professional version of it where you can pay a monthly fee and have some extra features like that. But it's worth checking out because it is simple to use, and it does route through a standard HDMI wire. And then that sort of brings us to network. The network has basically taken over the audio side of the business and is moving towards taking over the video side of the business. As you can see with some of the problems we're having here today, it's not perfect. We're doing everything we're doing here today via the network, and I'll sort of demonstrate some stuff to you. But even what you're going to find, and you've probably already noticed this from some manufacturers that are out there, where you have network-based audio distribution systems where the actual speakers are connected via the network as well, which allows you to set up zones on the fly. You can change zones at any moment in time. But of course, you have to have a network that is up and operational and reliable, not the kind of network that you would typically see in a hotel environment like this, something that you have more control over. But it's going that way, and everybody's moving that direction. And the most profitable AV gear for the last year is, number one, is signal routing and control. A lot of things, people may not even think about this, but if you take a look at the top 3 profitable product categories of the last year, number 1 is signal routing and control. Number 2 is mounts and racks. So if you work for Premier or you work for Chief, then you're really happy because they're helping you to make a whole lot of money. And power management. So if you haven't checked out these companies like Tripp Lite here, I mean, they're a company. How many of you are dealers of Tripp Lite? How many of you sell Tripp Lite's power management stuff? I mean, that's the third most profitable category of product in the last year. So it's definitely, if you're not selling power management as a regular integrated product, you're not integrating power management into your systems, it's something that you should consider doing. And I think a lot of people don't totally focus on that. It's not, selling mounts, even though it's very profitable, it's not something that's as glamorous as selling video walls and video conferencing systems. So I think a lot of people don't even realize that. So that's sort of where we've been over the last year. So now let's jump into where we're going to go over the next 12 to 16, maybe 18 months in technology, because there's a lot of stuff moving, a lot of changes in the market. So again, I want to remind the people online, if you have any questions, and we do have people who are answering some of the questions that can be answered on the fly here. You can just tweet the question using the hashtag E4Live, and of course we'll have a question and answer session at the end of this session. So, all right, so the network's going to become a bigger and bigger deal, and what's going to happen is we're going to see a hybrid of products start to come out. So over the next year, you're going to see every major manufacturer out there, meaning every signal routing and distribution company, and of course there's a lot of them. There used to be only 2 or 3, but now there's 7 or 8 companies that probably most of you guys use. I mean, most of you are probably using companies like Krystal and Kramer and AMX and Extron and companies like that. They're all going to start building hybrid products where you take legacy input ports and put those on the network, as well as network-based content in one box. So instead of having separate boxes that do all this, and then you put that on the network, you're going to have one sort of hub where you have legacy ports for HDMI sources and VGA sources, and then we have network-based content that already exists, all connected through one box, and you're going to see that be a big product line that's going to be launched over the next year. All of it ultimately will go to the display using technologies like some of the stuff we've talked about today, like HD-based-T. Now, I told you that we're using the network for what we're doing today. So the way I'm sending this presentation is I'm doing this wirelessly through the network. This is my remote controller, so I'll take that out. So what I'm doing here is, as I change slides, it's doing it in real time. And so I'm sending the video and audio, all the stuff you saw across the network. And what I'm using here is, ultimately, what I'm using to do this is a box that you're probably all familiar with called the Apple TV. So this is a $99 box. It has an HDMI out, and I'm connecting to the projector through HDMI, and it of course sends the audio as well. So we're breaking the audio out and sending it to that mixer there, and of course to the people at home via streaming. But all I'm doing is I'm just using AirPlay, which is built into every Apple product built after September 2011. So every product that Apple makes built after September 2011 has the capability of doing what I'm doing here, which is to deliver presentations totally wirelessly. But what's really cool about this is that this is not the only way to do it. I mean, the negative thing of this is I have to use Apple all the way. I mean, Apple, you have to buy into the Apple ecosystem and use Apple 100% of the way. Right? I mean, this works great with an iPad. It works great with an iPhone, and of course, it works great with a MacBook, MacBook Air laptop. Ultimately, in the future, where we're going to get to is where we don't actually have to have the laptop there to make a presentation. There's really no reason why I need to have this laptop, because the Apple TV is connected to the network, which means that the projector is now connected to the network. I'm connected to the network with all my other devices. So really, what I should have is a really good quality user interface that allows me to grab the content wherever it is. So I put all my presentations on iCloud, and that's because it's free. Apple, as an Apple user, you get X amount of storage space on iCloud. So I put all my stuff on iCloud. And so theoretically, if I could launch this presentation from my Apple TV via iCloud and present it that way, which it's capable of doing. I don't do it that way for 2 reasons. Number one is I'm not going to be able to count on the network in a hotel like this to be 100% reliable. And number 2 is I might get in a place where I'm presenting where I don't have all Apple products. So I'm still having to carry my laptop and still have my presentation on my laptop that way as a backup. So if for some reason something doesn't work, I can wire up and we're still able to operate and still able to go. And I know you're familiar with these scenarios, and you're going to have more and more, and the reason why I'm showing this to you is because you're going to have more and more customers saying, I can do this in my house, why can't I do this in my boardroom? How many of you had customers already ask for having Apple TV put in their rooms? How many of you have integrated Apple TV? All right, it's not that easy to do. I mean, you may think, okay, well, I'm just going to put the Apple TV in here. It is easy to do when they completely control the network. But in the case of a university, it's the worst possible scenario you can imagine. So those of you who sells to universities out there, putting Apple TV into a university can be a big nightmare. In fact, we're doing it right now at the University of North Carolina. I teach at the University of North Carolina. I teach in the journalism school. I teach 2 classes, new media technologies and the impact on it, and its impact on the future of advertising, marketing, and PR. And I also teach branding. They're both marketing classes at the University of North Carolina's journalism school. And we're putting in Apple TVs all across campus. But to do that, we literally had to change all the access points out throughout the entire campus and all the routers on campus. It just happened to be the right time to do that. So this is something that's costing, a lot of money, hundreds of thousands of dollars. So they're upgrading that at the same time. But the old Cisco routers they had, which were only old as in only 6 years old, weren't capable of doing the network security that was required to put an Apple TV on the network. And for those of you who understand network security, then you probably understand sort of the basics of the complexity of this. However, there are tools out there that allow you to do exactly what I'm doing here, and you're actually going to see one on the show floor. So today, I want you to go check out Barco's ClickShare. How many of you are familiar with Barco's ClickShare? Okay, so imagine AirPlay, what I was just showing you, compatible with any operating system. So you can do Windows, you can do Android, you can do even iOS. It's even compatible with Apple's AirPlay system. So you can actually take an AirPlay network and control it with Barco's ClickShare product. So you can actually put an Apple TV on ClickShare, in fact. So that's another way of doing it. Now, that's a lot of that sort of the terminology used for that segment of the market is called collaboration. That's a sort of a big term. Everybody's starting to use the term collaboration. Where that's ultimately going to go is where we're able to put multiple images on the screen at the same time, which sort of brings me to another point, which I'll get to in just a second. But what's nice about this is it simplifies the design of a system when the network is reliable. So the message here is that you have to have control over the network, right? The only way you guys are going to have control over the network is that you need to understand how networks work. You need to be able to go into a customer site, whether it be a university or corporation or even a small doctor's office that's having you do a digital signage install, and you have to come across confident that you know what you're talking about, but more importantly, you really need to understand how the network works. So I am recommending that all of you go to Cisco.com, CISCO.com. I'm sure you've all heard of Cisco. They're the world's largest manufacturer of routing and router equipment. And all go and just Google CCENT. CCENT. That is an entry-level network certification for sales and systems designers. They've designed this specifically for you. This is a great class. It's about 3 to 4 days, depending on what you do. So if you're just in sales, you do the 3-day. If you're a systems designer where you're designing systems, and you do the 4-day. And it will tell you everything you need to know about configuring that. You'll be able to go home and reconfigure your router and make sure it works without just using the standard default setup password stuff that comes with the router when you buy it. You'll be able to also manage the network in a company your size. Most companies of your size, this will give you the ability to do that. And the greatest part about this is you'll totally understand how, when somebody answers your question, well, how much bandwidth is this video conferencing system going to operate, and how is it going to affect the security settings that we have on our network? How do we break past the firewall? What devices can we put on the front side of the firewall? What can we put on the back side and still make sure it operates so we're able to connect at all locations? That certification will allow you to do that. So I highly recommend, I'm pushing this. I don't get paid to push this, but I'm telling you, this is the place where you need to go. You need to get this certification, because all the stuff that I've talked about, you'll notice the future. When I'm saying all the stuff's going to happen over the next year, all is affected by the network. Everything that I talked about a year and a half ago when I came here, digital signage, is all network-based. All the stuff that I just demonstrated for you, the way audio is being distributed with AVB and HD-based T for video, is all across the network. So I highly recommend that you do that. And of course, since I'm talking about digital signage, over the next year to 18 months, we're going to continue to see explosive growth. And again, there's 3 areas of monetization for digital signage: the hardware, the service, and the content. Remember the content from a year and a half ago when I was here? That's the creative. That's the stuff that changes every day. That's where there's a lot of money. The margins on the content are 400% to 500%. So I don't think there's anything else you guys sell that get you that kind of margins. So that alone should make it worth you getting into the digital signage market. Every segment of digital signage is going to see double-digit growth over the next year. Selling the entire package is the key. Don't just stop at the sign itself. Sell the whole network, meaning connecting all these signs together and managing them across a network, because that's where the money is. And as digital signage continues to mature, what we're going to see is personalized digital signage using devices like this, where we're actually taking the content that you guys are producing and personalizing it and sending it directly to these personal information displays that we're all carrying around in our pocket. And for those of you who don't know, there's actually a trade show just on digital signage called the Digital Signage Expo. It's already happened for 2013, but it's in March of 2014. It's in Vegas, so it's a 4-hour drive from here. Who doesn't like going to Vegas? Unless you go all the time. Yeah, Josh is raising his hand. I totally agree with you, Josh. However, if you're not there all the time, then it's a great place to go, and it's a show that's dedicated to digital signage. And of course, you're going to see a lot of digital signage products here on the show floor today. And in 5 years, as I said to you a year and a half ago, digital signage is just going to be part of the advertising market. So we're going to be playing a large part. And just as a little point of information, I teach in the journalism school, and we have all the access to all the statistics in the world of advertising. Digital signage has gone from 0% of the advertising budgets, okay, meaning there was no money allocated to digital signage 3.5 years ago in the world of advertising. So if you tracked advertising trends, whereas 3 years ago, 65% of money, approximately 65% of money spent on advertising was on television ads. So if you take a look at the whole advertising market, the television ads market at the end of this year will be down around 45 to 48%. So that's a huge drop. At the same time, digital signage has all of a sudden appeared as 3 to 5% of the advertising market. So in 3 years, it's gone from nothing to 3 to 5% of the total advertising market. That means there must be millions of access points for digital signs out there. So it's definitely a market that we should all be playing in. And of course, it's a technology market, so it's perfect for us. So what else are we going to see? Over the next year, you're going to see 5,000 lumen small projectors, 1,000 lumen pico projectors, and HD-based T integrated into every projector. So let's talk about each one of those. We already have, well, first of all, it's probably worth pointing out that, we already have 5,000 ANS lumens projectors now, right? I mean, they're a little large. The one that we're actually using behind here, the NEC that we're using here is a 5,000 ANS, or sorry, this is not an NEC. I should give the correct plug. This is it is an NEC projector that's back there. It's about a 5,000 ANS lumens projector. But what we're going to see is 5,000, by the end of next year, you're going to see 5,000 ANSI lumens projectors are about this big. So what we now call portable projectors will be 5,000 ANSI lumens, thanks to new lighting techniques and new technologies that are coming out. I don't know how many of you saw Sony's pure laser projector at Infocom this past year. They're just getting ready to ship it, but if you don't really understand how it works, just Google Sony laser, because it's very different. It's not like the Canon hybrid laser projectors, which are LED laser projectors. This is 100% laser-based projection technology. So it's not like the hybrid ones that have been coming from Mitsubishi and Casio and companies like that. This is a 100% laser projector. So the technologies like that, and of course LED, we're going to see much brighter LED, which is also going to not only produce a situation where we have 5,000 ANSI lumens portable projectors, but we're going to see 1,000 ANSI lumens pico projectors. And that'll happen by the middle of next year, actually. So those little teeny projectors, the ones that you can stick in your pocket, the really, really small ones right now that they're about 3 times the thickness of an iPhone. Those are going to be 1,000 ANSI lumens. Right now, they're about 600. And that blows me away personally. How many of you have been in the market for 20 years? Okay. And the reason, this should blow you away, right? I mean, because the brightest CRT projector ever made was 670 ANSI lumens. I mean, it was measured at 670 ANSI lumens. Brightest CRT projector, like normal CRT. There were some giant prototype projectors with huge lenses, but the ones that we all sold were 670 lumens. Okay? There are pico projectors that you can stick almost in your pocket. They're a little too big, and there are even battery-operated versions of these things that are 5 to 650 ANSI lumens. That blows me away. I mean, that's happened during the time I've been in this industry, because I've been in this industry for 20 years as well. Well, we're going to have 1,000 ANSI lumens. Now, when we cross the 1,000 ANSI lumens, that's a huge barrier to cross, because that means it can be used in all these rooms that are commonly referred to as huddle rooms, where we have spaces like brainstorming rooms, small conference rooms. So that means that those projectors will be sort of commonly available through any way you need to get them, and available to place wherever you want to place them. What's cool about that is that allows us to do some really cool things that we would not normally have thought of doing with projectors, and we'll talk about that. And of course, we don't know what other companies are going to get in the projector market. It's probably going to turn into more and more of a commodity type product when you're talking about the standard VGA, connected, XGA, WXGA, that kind of resolution projector. But there's a plus to this. Oh, let me go back to that. I should say there's the HD base T thing. So what's happening is, as I mentioned to you, 3 manufacturers already. By the end of next year, every manufacturer will have HD base T direct inputs on the projector. What that means is that you'll have no reason to run VGA or RGB-HV or HDMI to projectors or monitors anymore, for that matter. You'll just run Cat5e and Cat6 directly into them, and it'll carry video, audio, control, USB, and potentially power, depending on how much power is required for the projector or the monitor. So if a monitor is in the range of 40 to 50, maybe 60, possibly 70 watts, we can power it now with HD base T. If it's more than that, we got to use, obviously, we got to have to still have a power cord. But other than that, everything else can be plugged in through HD base T. So that's something to sort of watch. So what is going to be the next big differentiator? As I mentioned to you earlier, is going to be integrating a control system-like interface into the projector. So what you're going to see is projector manufacturers over the next year sort of get into the control system business. Not to compete with companies like Extron and AMX and Krystal, not at all. They're going to get into the control system business to allow you to access content across the network so that you don't have to have a separate control system to manage that content. So if you can imagine, how many of you have Apple TV at home, or a box like Apple TV, like a Roku or something like that? Okay, can you imagine an interface like that being integrated into a projector or monitor? That's what you're going to see. That's going to be sort of the first generation. Now, maybe in the 2 or 3 years down the road, we'll see something more sophisticated. And in fact, if Crestron has their way, Crestron's trying to get projector manufacturers to integrate their user interface into the projector's interface. In fact, they're licensing it to projector companies out there. You've probably seen stuff about this. But that remains to be seen. I don't think that will happen overnight. What more likely you're going to see is something like an Apple TV-like interface, which then the projector's connected to the internet. And of course, Mitsubishi had that cloud projector series of projectors. And of course, unfortunately, Mitsubishi's since gone out of the projector market just here in the last week. But they had the cloud projector. That was a good concept, because the concept is connected to the network and then pull the content across the network. Right now, that kind of seems foreign to you, but when I come back to you in a year and a half now, it's going to be, every manufacturer is going to be doing that. Okay, everyone will have the ability to do that. Now, why does that really matter? Well, it's not just the control of the projector that we're talking about here. It's the ability to connect multiple sources to the projector that's the key. So I'll be able to have a projector like this. Imagine if I was using a 4K projector. And this is something we'll talk about at today's luncheon panel. 4K is awesome. How many of you have seen 4K? How many of you have actually seen it up close? It is amazing looking. There's 2 real awesome applications for 4K. All right? There's a lot of hype to 4K. I totally agree. But there's 2 real-life awesome applications. Number 1 is 4K can do glasses-free 3D, and it looks amazing. So we will finally have glasses-free 3D that is watchable. You don't have to stand on access. You don't have to stand at a certain point. If you have a chance to see 4K glasses 3D, you'll be blown away. And so that's the first application. So 3D might actually have a resurgence with 4K in the consumer market because of how well it does glasses free, because that's the biggest barrier to 3D, is the fact that you have to wear the glasses. Second biggest barrier is the fact that 20% of people can't even see 3D. So if you throw that group out, then we still can market to the other 80%. The second application for 4K that's really cool is that this thing of collaboration that I mentioned a few minutes ago. So here's the key, and you'll see this demonstrated on the show floor. If I put a 4K projector here, I can, of course I can make the screen whatever size I want. So you can imagine taking a room and putting up a 4K projector. I can then put 4 separate images up side by side in their native resolution without reducing it, without scaling it down in resolution in any way. So I can have a PowerPoint presentation, 1080 video, and 2 other people connected and collaborating via video conferencing and their computer desktops side by side. So all 4 on the screen at the same time in native resolution, because that's 4 times 1920 by 1080. So I can have 4 1920 by 1080. Remember I mentioned earlier that the whole Japan and Korea, where most of our imaging is coming from nowadays, is all gone to 1080p standard. right? So everything coming out of there is all 1080p, and what they're doing is chopping that up to give you these other sizes. They're making everything 1080p, and they're cutting the edges off it to make it 16 by 10. They're cutting it off to make it WXGA and so on and so forth. So what we're going to see is 4K gives you the ability to have 4 of those 1080p images on the screen at the same time. And then having an interface like what you have with Barco's ClickShare, which is the thing I told you to check out. Imagine the Barco ClickShare interface with a 4K projector is going to be a really cool combination. So how many of you are familiar with ClickShare? Okay, if you're not seeing ClickShare, go to the show and look at ClickShare, because you'll see how easy that is to integrate into every single classroom or every single boardroom, conference room, or training room you're using. And the cool thing is, you don't even have to use Barco projectors. ClickShare works with Krystal projectors. Krystal even has their own version of it called Brio. They have it that they're just starting to ship. The Brio product we haven't played around with, so I can't talk about it because I don't know it. But the ClickShare we have, and I know it. But there's going to be other manufacturers that come out there, and you'll see that will sort of be the product that you can put into these collaboration spaces where you can project multiple images at the same time. And of course, all that stuff's going to come from control system manufacturers, and as we now see with the with the brightness issues, the issue of lumens is pretty much dead. We don't really need to spec things based on lumens anymore. I want to show you something really cool. So what I'm going to spend the next few minutes on here is showing you what's really neat about projectors coming down in price and being readily available to all of us a way that we can use projectors in ways that we have not thought about using them before. So everything you see in this space here is all done with projectors. So you can now, because of the price and the brightness of projectors, use projectors for art and for lighting. And there's a company out there called Visual Worshipper that's done a phenomenal job in the church market. They only target the church market. And you'll see, of course, they have their image magnification projectors here, but all this other stuff that you see around the walls, and you're going to see a couple of other examples here, that's all projection. That could not have been done affordably 2 years ago. It would have just been too expensive. The really neat thing here is he's only using $600 to $1,000 projectors. So he's using very inexpensive NEC projectors in this case, $600 to $1,000 projectors. So all these hymns that he's projecting up here, of course the 2 image magnification projectors are still there, but all this other stuff, that's more engaging for the MTV generation. It's more interesting than just seeing someone stand up at the pulpit yelling at you about all the things you've been doing wrong. Another application is this. Anybody can put a projector in the front of a classroom, but not anybody can do this. And this is what we really should be doing. Imagine reinventing the classroom, because how many times have you sat in a presentation, maybe this is one of those, where the presenter is going too fast that you can't absorb all the content on each slide? Well, imagine showing the current content on this slide and then showing the last 6 slides of content on the left and right side of the wall. That's the advantage of a product like the Barco ClickShare, because this kind of collaboration is easy to do. We don't have to use an expensive scaling product. We don't have to use a multi-imaging product to do this. This becomes very inexpensive to do. And of course, since we have the price of projectors come down, we could do the same thing even on short throw applications in boardrooms. So this is the kind of stuff that we should be thinking about doing, because yes, projectors have become sort of a commodity in the way that you can buy them across the internet, and they're very inexpensive, and we can't make as much money on them as we could. However, the thing is, no one's going to buy this from you if you don't tell them it exists. There's a certain percentage of people that will say, I never thought about doing it that way. So even presenting this as a new way of building a room becomes creative, and you win the job, and you get the sale for the projectors and all the other gear as a byproduct of the fact that you were creative on the design of that installation. So let's take a look at sort of that typical wall using a 4K projector. Instead of putting a standard 1080p projector up there, or an XGA projector for that matter, I'm going to take and make the whole wall a digital canvas, for lack of a better term. That's the term I'm going to use. So I'm going to put a 4K projector, so that way my PowerPoint presentation is full screen. I can also put native resolution content, project a clock, project a calendar, even project some design elements to the room, and I'm being a lot more creative. So that's a great application for 4K there, is taking a room that would have normally just been a standard conference room and really immersing people in the content. How many of you, by the way, you want to talk about immersing in content? this is a great example of consumer immersion and content. How many of you have seen Gravity? How many of you saw it in IMAX 3D? Go see it again if you haven't seen it. If you go see the movie, don't go see it unless you see it in IMAX 3D, because if you don't see it in IMAX 3D, you're going to basically think the movie's not really that good, because doesn't have much of a plot. But if you see it in IMAX 3D, would you agree? You were completely immersed. It was the best example of realistically using 3D I've ever seen. Like the very first scene when that space shuttle is coming around, you're like, oh my God, I'm like completely immersed into this. I really feel like I'm watching the space shuttle go around the Earth here. My laptop just fell on the ground, so let's see if it still works. Of course, in monitors, we're going to have OLED technology, which you're going to see today. We also are seeing flexible display technology, and these cube technologies are going to grow. You're going to see larger versions of these cubes, and you're going to see more manufacturers get into this segment of the market. And the consumer device, consumer products will basically drive sort of the development of control systems. So AirPlay, that example that I gave you, that's a very consumer, it's aimed at the consumer, but of course that's going to trickle through the professional market as well and have an impact. As I mentioned to you earlier, the codec's about to go 100% software-based, so we're not going to be selling video conferencing hardware as much. We're going to be selling video conferencing services more. So the more that you can get into selling the services side of your businesses, the better off you'll be, because what you'll see is companies like Polycom and Cisco and others move the codec to the cloud, still have the high-resolution camera options, still have the connectivity options, the collaboration options, but they'll manage the conferencing in the cloud, which means that you can connect. And the cool thing about this, by the way, and the best part of this, is you will finally see over the next year Skype integrated into every video conferencing technology. So you'll be able to connect Skype to Polycom, you'll be able to connect Skype to Cisco, you'll be able to connect Skype to every video conferencing technology you're using now, which is the big drawback, right? I mean, everybody, you put in a video conferencing system, and the customer says, well, I want to be able to connect Skype to it too, and you're like, it can't be done. Well, it will all be able to be done because of these new technologies and new collaboration. And then finally, we're going to see more and more networked audio. Ultimately, everything in the audio world will be networked. As I said, even the speakers. Right now, we still have most of the speaker manufacturers still using speaker wire connectivity, but more and more of them are moving towards connecting everything across the network and doing it the way Sonos does it. Okay, how many of you have Sonos or have seen Sonos? Okay, if you haven't, I use this as an example because you're going to see more and more audio and video going like the way of Sonos, where it's all network-based and the user interface is the key. Sort of the stuff just works, but you have to have a really good user interface, because you may have access, iTunes gives you access to millions and millions of songs, but it doesn't do them any good if you can't figure out how to access it. And that's the nice thing about the user interface of iTunes or iRadio, or for that matter, Pandora or any of these other music services. If you can sort of imagine that being used in our industry, where we're giving the customer a Pandora-like interface to access all their video, presentations for the whole university into this particular auditorium or classroom. And by the way, in 2008 was really the beginning of this IT-AV convergence, and none of us were really sort of talking about it then. We were just sort of learning about it. And it didn't matter as much then as it does now. But in 2013, as you probably noticed, during this course of this year, the home AV market has moved into the Pro AV space. How many of you went to CEDIA, by the way, last month? For those of you who went to CEDIA, you probably noticed that probably 40%, maybe, would you agree, 45% of the total products exhibited at CEDIA this year were commercial products. 3 years ago when you went to CEDIA, it was all home AV stuff. I mean, I'm not exaggerating that 40% of the products were commercial-based products. So they're moving into the Pro AV space. And of course, the IT integrators are as well. In fact, when we surveyed the IT integrators earlier this year, they said their AV project leads had doubled. So the IT integrators are seeing AV project leads doubled. They're sort of accidentally falling into AV projects. They're not intentionally going after the AV business. And they really don't understand the sort of smoke and mirrors that we have in our industry, because we don't use standards. The nice thing about the IT world is everything is standards. We just make shit up, right? I mean, if we don't have a name for something, we just make it up. And to make the name sound really cool, we'll put a big letter at the beginning and a big letter in the middle and put the two words together, and we got a whole new word, and it sounds really cool, and then all of a sudden it becomes a standard, right? I mean, who would have thought, what does RGB HV mean? But everybody in our industry knows what it means. You walk outside of our industry, like, what are you talking about? I mean, we just make stuff up. The word computer video interface was made up. audio distribution amplifiers. We just make stuff up. We don't standardize stuff. So that's sort of, we're dealing with sort of a collaboration / collision of AV and IT in a way, because they're all standards-based. We're sort of all over the place. And the good thing is there's job security in being kind of like making stuff up as we go. But at the same time, that we ultimately have to work together with them. So their AV leads may have doubled, but as we also surveyed them, we also found out that more of them are working with AV integrators than ever before. So most of them are partnering with AV integrators. So as they're doing video conferencing integration, they're partnering with AV companies to do the rest of the room. So they're not intentionally coming in to compete with us. They just don't know what to do with those AV leads when they get them. And what happens is that they just end up calling an IT distributor and just adding AV lines to their product line, even though they really don't understand the technology. So there's an opportunity here, because our leads haven't doubled over the last year. I mean, the surveys we see from the AV industry is our industry is back to double-digit growth in most areas, but of course we're not back to where we were prior to 2008. And finally, I want to leave you with one thing. There's a movement on in green AV, where there was a big thing going on in green AV, where that was going to be an awesome opportunity for us to make money and a good marketing thing. Where green AV is now is really more to the level what's considered smart AV, which has sort of brought on this whole new segment of the industry, which includes smart building technology, which means that we are now being given the opportunity to get in on projects where we're able to put in and spec products and technology in before the building's being built. So be watching this trend. I can't necessarily tell you how this is going to play out in the near future, because this is all new. But you're going to start seeing the term smart AV more than green AV, and you're going to start seeing smart building technology being used more and more. And companies like Krystal have smart building initiatives. AMX has a smart building initiative. Daylight has a smart building initiative. A lot of the manufacturers have embraced this and are helping you get into that segment of the market. And basically what it is defining systems, telling you what happens to them before they actually have problems, and can sort of manage themselves. And that requires heavy-duty user interfaces, control systems that are a lot more sophisticated than the typical one we install, and can ultimately save the client a lot of money, because they turn the HVAC off when they're not actually using it, or when people aren't in the building. And if you can translate that to turning everything off, each piece of AV gear. In fact, I mentioned Trip Light earlier. Trip Light actually has power strips that you can turn off each individual outlet individually via the network, for example. You can not only program them to be turned on and off, but you can access them across the network. And all this, of course, is thanks to the awesome network that's out there. And all that we've been doing today has all been based on Wi-Fi. So even we don't have the perfect network, even though we set up our own network inside here. We're ultimately tied to the network the hotel gave us, to the internet. So now's the time where you get a chance to ask any questions. So if you have any specific questions that you want to have answered, or if there's technologies I didn't talk about that you'd like to have addressed, we have a couple minutes for that. Yes?
LED lighting?
Yeah.
Any just general comments about where it's at, where it's going?
Yeah, so that's a really good, his question was LED lighting. Well, one of the biggest companies that makes raw component LED is a company that's based 10 miles down from our office. So we do know a lot of what's going on there, but unfortunately we're not privy to all the stuff going on. There's a company called Cree Research, okay? They invented the blue LED, which sort of revolutionized the LED world, because now we can get white as a color. They tell me that they're going to have an LED module that will be able to be used in portable projectors that will generate 10,000 ANSI lumens in 3 years. So they said they'll have a module, meaning the size that fit in the hand like a remote control, that would generate 10,000 ANSI lumens in 3 years. So the projector manufacturers then have to take that and integrate that into, obviously, the optics and the technology that they're using. So you're just going to see brighter and brighter. And then the nice thing, of course, about LED, for those of you who don't know this, is it uses significantly less power. So a 5,000 ANSI lumens projector using a typical lamp like we're using now, if you switch to an LED, uses 1/3 the amount of power. So, another question?
Have you looked into the Crestron Air Media systems
Yes.
on a wide scale? Like
Okay.
for a campus level, like you were saying you're integrating the Apple TV. Why would you choose that over, say, Air Media?
Okay, no. Hold on. We're not integrating Apple TV. I'm just here to show you what's going on. But people are integrating Apple TV. Okay, so Crestron's Air Media is brand new, so it's only just now come out, and there's not a whole lot of research on it or history on it yet. However, that's another one of those systems similar to the Christie Brio and the Barco ClickShare. So that could also be categorized in that same collaboration, wireless signal routing distribution space. So yes, it's worth mentioning that that's available as well. I don't know if they'll have that here at the show or not, but we haven't talked to very many customers that have integrated. Of course, we read what Crestron says about it, but we don't know yet, but it's in the same sort of space. Yeah.
What about things like Miracast, DLNA, other wireless technologies?
Yeah. So there's so much stuff out there. Of course, most of that stuff starts in the consumer world and then sort of trickles down to or up, depending on how you look at it, to the professional world. DLNA obviously was sort of the non-AirPlay groups attempt at pushing audio wirelessly across the network, and of course they've added video. But all these are worth looking at. But ultimately, the big three are what is Android going to be compatible with, what is Apple going to be compatible with, and what's Microsoft going to be compatible with. So if you'll kind of pay attention to those three, and then that's going to be the winner probably. Yeah.
This is related to the projectors with LED lamps.
Uh-huh.
My understanding is that you cannot change the lamps in LED projectors after about 10,000 hours. You have to completely throw away. Is it worthwhile to switch from the regular lamp projectors to LED?
Yeah,
and the second part is that in case after throwing the projector, what will happen to the control gears in a few years?
Okay, so it's two totally separate questions. So the advantage of LED is beyond just the fact that it lasts a lot longer than a traditional light. So a typical lamp in the same projector might last 4,000 to 5,000 hours. LED is going to last 10,000 hours. And yes, right now the current generation of projectors aren't modular where you can take the LED lighting out and put in a new lighting array. And the reason for that is because the technology is moving so fast, the current lighting array they use won't be available by the time that 10,000 hours happens. The advantages, however, are twofold. One is uniformity of lighting. So you're going to get the same amount of light all over the entire image as opposed to a hot spot like what we have now with most lighting stuff. And the second thing is the dissipation of light over time is almost non-existent. So what happens with LED is with traditional lamp, you lose 50% of your brightness in half the period of time. With an LED, you don't. You lose maybe 10% of your brightness and then it just stops working. So it's not the same dissipation. So you get more uniformity over time. So there are advantages to that. And the reason why they aren't offering modular replacement is simple, is that 3 years or 4 years from now, when you want to replace that module won't even exist. It'll be a whole different module. But it's coming. More projectors will do that. To answer your control system question, will control system manufacturers still exist? Absolutely. What we're talking about is, and it's happened for the whole time I've been in the market, I've seen this happen over and over again. You guys will remember this. Jay Regina back there will remember this. When the LCD panel came out, everybody said the overhead projector business was dead. It took 10 years for people to stop putting overhead projectors. And in fact, there was a new industry invented when the overhead projector went away, and that's the document camera. So what happens is there's these sort of evolutions, and one of those will be what will control system manufacturers do. And what Crestron and companies like that are trying to do is they're trying to modulate, sort of license their technology to be used in other companies' products. But those companies like Crestron, Amex, Extron, companies that are sort of dominating that segment of the market, they're not going anywhere. They're just going to evolve and move as the market moves. And there's always a high-end market as well. Yeah.
Regarding annotating images in terms of displays, what is the future of that? I've noticed classrooms and some boardrooms, people want to be able to annotate on the display, whether it be a 4K or what have you.
Yeah. Okay, so one thing that happened over the last 3 years that really made that market explode, I mean, prior to 3 years ago, you had very few choices, right? You had separate annotation boxes made by those same manufacturers I've mentioned. And then you had Smart Technologies, right, which was the sort of leader of that whole segment of the market. Texas Instruments integrated that technology into the DLP chip. So anybody who was building a DLP projector could add sort of not only annotation but also collaboration into their projector if they so choose to do so. So right now it's available. Most even low-cost DLP projectors that are marketed to the education space have that capability, even the $1,100 to $1,500 projectors. But LCD is not the same. So with LCD, you have to have a third-party box. The technology is such now, the scaling has gone down so much in price that that's going to be readily available sort of everywhere over the next 3 or 4 years. There's going to be, instead of it being a $10,000 or a $5,000 box, it'll be like a $200 or $300 box, and it'll be readily available. But it's going to take some time. I mean, you've still got 3 or 4 years. But the price is coming down pretty quickly. Yeah.
So is it safe to say that HD-based-T will eventually replace HDMI? And also, will HD-based-T be able to be used over networking, especially traditional networking switches, to be able to split signals to several different devices?
No and no. HD-based-T will not replace HDMI because HDMI is the sort of the standard for home video distribution. HDMI or HD-based-T sort of aimed to integrate all those things together in applications where you need to. In the home, you don't need to. So it's not going to replace HDMI. You'll still see those same boxes. DVD players, Blu-ray players, set-top boxes will have HD-based-T outputs and HDMI outputs. Projectors will have HD-based-T inputs and HDMI inputs for those applications where you want to. And the second question was again? Oh, no, because you need a higher bandwidth router. So you need gigabit routers. So you can't necessarily do that over traditional. You can by compressing the video, right? But of course, the compressing video issues bring in a whole another set of issues. What will most likely happen is wireless standards will surpass wired standards for most applications. Not all applications. When you're doing an entire facility, you're going to want to use gigabit Ethernet. We have time for one more question.
Yeah, you talked about the 4K displays and the fact that you can have multiple sections of the display. How's that done? Is that done through CMS software?
Yes. Yeah, it's done. There's 2 ways it's done. First of all, some projector manufacturers have integrated tiling into their projector where you actually have 4 inputs, and they actually do sort of like consumer televisions do picture-in-a-picture. And then there are third-party manufacturers, all the companies I've mentioned to you before, like the Crystrons and Extrons of the world, have third-party boxes where you plug in multiple inputs and then you can tile the screen however you want. And of course, that industry has existed for a long time. There's companies like Jupiter Systems and of course Christie buying Vista Systems, and those are all those types of products. But now we have them less expensive, less fancy. So when you're doing a high-end system where you want to be able to put the image anywhere, you'll use a $10,000 box. But when you want to just divide it into 4 quadrants, now you can do that for a couple of $1,000s, whereas before you had to spend $5,000 to $10,000 to do that. So yes, so it's built into some projectors, and there's third-party boxes out there, like the Barco ClickShare. It does that for you. It doesn't do 4K, but it does that collaboration. They'll obviously add 4K over the next year. That's what I was sort of intimating, is that even though the Barco ClickShare doesn't do 4K today, and I'm sure some people from Barco are watching this, it will do 4K by next year at Infocom. I'm quite sure they'll announce that capability because they make 4K projectors. They're going to want to sell 4K projectors. So anyway, thank you very much for your time today. Hopefully this has been helpful. I'll hang out, answer any questions. Thanks to you guys that have been watching online. And this whole presentation will be put on the website that's in your literature that Melody passed out by Monday. So you'll actually be able to watch this in 720p on Monday. Thank you.